This is the canoe that I brought on my 2018 trip through paddle of the Northern Forest Canoe Trail. And in this review, I will also be looking at the other gear that is canoe related that I brought. This canoe was built by myself with some help from my father, and it is a 17.5 foot long Atkinson Traveler designed by Roland Thurlow. And when it is dry, it weighs 74 pounds. And right after I got back from the trip, I weighed it, and it was 92.6 pounds. So it clearly gained a little bit of weight. So you can see that I have 3 seats in here. That is because I used this solo seat, which is the manufactured cane seat where the spline to hold the cane in started to come out. So I needed to cinch it up with some paracord. This is what I used when I was in it by myself, which was most of the time. Occasionally, 2 times actually, a friend joined one time and my dad joined another time. And when they were with me, they brought the stern seat and the bow seat, which I made. But most of the time, I was living right here. You can see maybe on these half ribs some of the varnish is worn off because of my feet standing there so much. In the middle we have a spruce carry yoke. It's my first attempt at a sculpted yoke to match my shoulders. And that's not all I use to carry the boat. I'll show you the tumpline setup in a moment. So you can see these half ribs in between the ribs made it very strong. There was no wood damage on this trip. However, the varnish did rub off here because I did the unthinkable, and as I was paddling I pried off the gunnels with my J-stroke. Gasp! On the end here I have a painter on either end, bungees under the deck, or bungees to keep it on the deck, which was very handy for use when I was tracking up. Pretty much most of my upstream portions I tracked at least somewhere on the upper Ammonoosuc, the Clyde, and the Androscoggin, and the Missisquoi, and on the Spencers. So I'll show you what the tumpline setup looks like before we flip it. So this is my tumpline setup. I saw this in a book by Cliff Jacobson. So these are trucker bungee cords and then just a canvas, essentially trampoline. And that's where my head would go. And you can see where it stains so much in the middle from all the sweat. And that helped transfer a lot of the weight to my head instead of my shoulders. So overall, this boat functioned very nicely, both by myself and with a partner. It worked very well on the rough waters of Lake Champlain and some of the Allagash headwaters. There's pretty much nothing that I would change about this boat. At times, the rounded bottom, I think this is more rounded than most Atkinson Traveler models are, led to some scraping in the shallow areas, but it made up for it in how it added to the speed and the stability on the large lakes. So let's flip this over for you. So here's the bottom of the boat. So the green is paint, then with a white pinstripe in between, and then this bottom is shellac right on the canvas, which has already been filled with oil and sand and things like that. So the shellac is a waxy surface that is easy to keep up and slides over things, which is very good because all these white marks are all the scratches that accumulated. This is where the canvas caught on something and scraped a lot off. Same stick happened right there. And there are 3 tears that happened. Here's one that I patched. Here's another that I patched. And here's a big one thanks to Spencer Stream that I patched. With the use of ambroid cement and some spare canvas. So it's certainly not a boat that is impregnable, but it is a style of boat that if you have the right equipment is very easy to fix if you have the know-how. The beauty of using a boat like this is that when the canvas really needs to be replaced, I can just take the canvas off, recanvas it, and it's as good as new. I'd be really interested to know the numbers of people who through paddle this trail with wooden boats, especially with wood canvas boats. I don't know the numbers. It seems pretty rare, but I do know of a few. So that's my review of the boat. Again, highly recommend it for a tandem trip or a solo trip if you like to handle big boats. I do. It gives me a lot of space to deal with and a lot of buoyancy on those lakes, etc. So let's get into the other canoe. These are the two paddles that I brought. So this paddle has been with me for 4 years. This is an ash paddle. It's a main guide style, especially with that grip at the top. So this grip allows you to use it. Let me show you here. So at the top, you hold it. You can either hold it across the top like this, or you can hold it on the side like this. Don't wrap your thumb. This allows you to change the height, and you can't tell, but this is about as tall as I am, and so that gives you a lot of leverage. There were oftentimes I was standing in the boat and using it while I was scouting rapids, and that variable length handle is very nice, and as you can see, it moves a heck of a lot of water. The ash made it very handy for using in rivers. Now for lakes, and something that was a little lighter on my hands and easier to use, I have this, which is sort of an otter tail style with a pretty subdued grip. Those are my initials, a stylized version. And then I made this paddle for the trip. So here you can see is the map of the route, starting down here in Old Forge and ending up there in Fort Kent. And on the other side I put a version of the blazes that are along the way. Both paddles suffered some wear and tear here because, of course, I was doing the unthinkable and prying off the gunnels. Both suffered the varnish came off on the tips of both, but no splitting. And I was careful with this spruce paddle. Anytime I thought I was going to hit something, I switched over to the ash paddle and kept the spruce for just deep lakes. So both paddles worked very nicely. Switching back and forth, I think, helped a lot with fatigue on my hands so that I didn't just have one kind of grip. Here we have my 12-foot spruce setting pole, which I made a number of years ago and have thinned down on and off throughout the years. So it was originally a small tree, tops up there, bottom's down here. On the bottom here, you have a lag screw, which is now almost rounded over, and a copper pipe. Now this bottom was flat when I started this trip pretty much. So this copper, you can kind of see, has peened over because I've used it so much. And I ended up thinning this down quite a bit. This used to be thicker and threw off the balance and floated. I thinned it down, which didn't hurt the strength too much because it's still plenty thick. But then the balance point was in a much better position. And on the top you can see how it's darker. That's because it's original wood, and also my oils of my hands have darkened it down because I've used it so much. I think my impression, and with everybody I've talked to, few people who do this trip use a pole, but it was invaluable to me on this trip. I probably used it for easily over 150, potentially 200 miles of the 700 miles. I used this pole. Anytime it was too deep or too shallow to use the paddles, or I was going upstream in a significant current, this was my tool of choice. Getting up beaver dams, it was a godsend. There was no way I would have had to get out of the boat many more times than I did had I not had this. So I really like using a pole, and I think that it's something that not enough people know how to use. It's very simple to make. The shoe on the bottom is really all that's required in terms of making anything other than thinning it down. So I am very glad I brought this.